Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition and the current online example for Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition, official game, Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook. What does an online game look like when Dungeons & Dragons, Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro Gaming has signed off and they say, this is Dungeons & Dragons. This is an online game. This is an example. And this is canon, right? Now, they're not saying it like specifically, they're not saying, oh, this is canon. But when you choose one group over another and you put forward, if somebody goes to YouTube right now and goes to look and see what does Dungeons and Dragons, Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro Gaming consider to be a good example of their game, it's what they're choosing to put on their channel, right? This isn't some group coming in and using D&D in ways that they don't want. This is WotC's depiction of their own game. Okay? So in that perspective, in my opinion, it's canon. So let's get into this. So real quick, I just want to say this. When it comes to Dungeons & Dragons online games, I detest online games. I really do. And I used to have a better opinion of them, but the pandemic has made it so clear that online games just suck. Right? Ginny D just said it. So here's where we're at. Okay. I don't like watching online games. There's just, I could be writing my own world. I could be creating, player characters. I could be creating new content for my game or to share with others. There's just so many better ways to spend your life than watching other people play D&D. Play D&D yourself or use your time to prepare to play D&D, but just don't. Life's too short. Don't watch other people play. It's a waste of time. So, to tell the truth, what I just did was I just watched an entire online session, right, on D&D's site. So, why did I do that? Well, I did it for you, right? So, this is for you. And the reason why is I'm a Dungeons & Dragons commentator, and I take it serious. I don't want to be ignorant of what's happening. So, I'm like, you know what? I better go watch an online game right now, current, and see what D&D considers online play. Because I hear all this stuff about Matthew Mercer. The game doesn't end with him. It certainly starts nowadays with him, but it doesn't end with him. There's other people playing, right? So I wanted to see what a modern Dungeons & Dragons online game looks like when WotC has chosen the group. So I watched the following, okay? I watched Paths Are Made by Walking, Not Waiting. That was the session title. It was Season 3, Episode 5, A Darkened Wish, okay? And here's everybody who was in it, okay? So first and foremost, it was B. David Walters, Dungeon Master, at B. David Walters, if you want to take a look on Twitter. Also, let's take a look here. Everybody's using their Twitter tag. Very, very interesting. Very interesting, right? I like to say the smartest people, the most people are on Facebook. The smartest people are on Twitter. Right? So, and these are all Twitter tags, right? So, Sam DeLeve played Aiden, the character Aiden, and he's at Tchaikovsky on Twitter, okay? Next was Aki, and by the way, that's the player name, okay? And then they were playing character Karen at MX Ginny in a Bottle. That's the Twitter tag. And then there was Alcuin Gersh playing the character Rayond at Different Elves on Twitter. And there was D'Artagnan Mataliano, player name there, character name Xander, and that person is at Dom Mataliano. And then there was Melee Damage, kind of a pun name there for the player name, playing Helene at Melee Damage, right, at Twitter. So I thought that was really interesting, and so that's who was playing in the game. So what I want to do now is I want to go ahead and explore this, right? And tell you, so having seen what Wizards of the Coast, what Hasbro Gaming considers a modern Dungeons & Dragons game right now, here's the things that I thought were good, and here's the things that I thought were bad. And I'm putting them in equal measure, okay? Because, I don't want to just jump in and, these people were taking their time to play the game, and I don't want to just dump on it. I want to recognize what, their hard work as well. But there were some things I liked, and there were some things I didn't like. And as a D&D commentator, I'm going to commentate on them. Let's get into it. All right. So first and foremost, I love the diversity. Right. So one, there were males and females. There were people of color. There were people who are not of color. There were lots of people, and they were diverse. More diverse than you would have seen 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And that's good. I love that. I love that aspect of this game. Okay, and it's no small thing because Wizards of the Coast is saying diversity is important. That's really good. Okay, that was good. By the way, if the background's green, I liked it. If the background's red, I didn't like it. It's bad, right? Okay. All right. Bad. No combat. This is a 2-hour session. There was no combat. I was like, wait, we're watching a Dungeons & Dragons game, and there is literally no combat? Now, is it okay for a D&D game to have no combat? No, right? Like, what are the pillars of the game? We all know it, right? Exploration, interaction, combat. Combat is 1/3 of the game, right? It's not 0%. So in this session, and you can go back and watch it, because I was like, is this happening? Right? There is one example where one character, I think, shoots fireballs at the, or I think it's firebolt, shoots fireball at the wall. When it happens, everyone laughs. It's a big joke. No one gets injured. There's no initiative, right? It's just like a kind of a display of anger by one character. It's not. There's no combat. No one ever rolls initiative in 2 hours of play, right? And I'm like, what? And because of that, I was not really entertained. Right? I was like, that's not great. That is really not great. I don't like that. Right? Like, it was not good. It was not good. Right? Man, did not like that. Right? What did I like? Okay, so this summer was pretty. There were some hard things that went down in America. I know there's some international viewers. We had a tough time in America this year, and BLM was a major thing this year, and so we had American police bringing out riot shields to deal with the people in their own neighborhoods, right? And I'm like, this is not great, man. And I really supported the BLM protesters. And I think they had some really valid points, and I don't think anybody in America could ignore what they were saying, right? We all needed to take a moment and say, hey, what's happening here? And you know what? I better check this before I say it. Yes, I want to get the preferred pronoun right. He, him, yeah. So B. Dave Walters was the dungeon master, and he appeared to be a person of color, right? So I think it was really important when we're coming out of, specifically out of a BLM summer, that Dungeons & Dragons is saying, we are not oblivious to what's happening in this country, right? Dungeons & Dragons is an American game. It's created by, its creator was American, Gary Gygax. It's made in America. It's an American game. It's an element of Americana, like comic books, like baseball, like jazz. It's a really important part of the game, right? And as an American game, it can't be just pretending that it's not cool to just keep playing D&D and ignore the world, right? So I really appreciate that Dungeons & Dragons was saying, hey, we're being sensitive in who we're choosing to give a platform. I like that. I think that was really good. Okay, what did I not like? Oh my gosh. All right, let's take a look at it, right? So the players were wearing figurative masks, not literal masks, because nowadays people wear literal masks, but they were wearing figurative masks, and I didn't like this. So what am I talking about here? Let's look at it, right? So, all right, so each one of these people were given the go-ahead by Wizards of the Coast to play their game on the Dungeons & Dragons YouTube channel. That is the greatest honor for a Dungeon Master, for a player. Now, it looks to me like this Dungeon Master was using their real name. If I was chosen by Dungeons & Dragons to play Dungeons & Dragons publicly under the Dungeons & Dragons banner, you could bet I'd be using my real name. But look at these names, right? B. Dave Walters. That looks real to me. Sam DeLeave. I don't know. Is that a real name or not? Who knows? I don't know, right? We're talking about the player now. Aki. That don't look, maybe? I don't know, right? Let's keep going here. Alcuin Gersh. Is that a real name? I'm not sure, right? And it's okay if I don't know, right? But D'Artagnan Metaliano, again, these don't look like real names, right? And and melee damage. There we go. So the last one, right? So at least one person in here, right, is like, you know what? I don't want to use my real name on this game. You've chosen me to carry the banner for Dungeons and Dragons, but that's not worthy of me using my real name to play, right? I'm like, wait, what? Why, right? And since there's clearly a fake name in here, right? That makes me wonder if these are real, right? Are there like, well, Aki, like, you know, is that person's name Madonna, right? Like, you know, like the issue then becomes, why don't you use your real name, right? Well, they may be doing it for a good reason, but what it makes me think back to is when I was in high school, right? And when I was in high school, I was a little in two worlds, right? So I was a wrestler, which was maybe put me into the jock column, but I wasn't a really good wrestler. I was like JV, right? But then I was also a nerd who played Dungeons and Dragons, right? And so when you're with your nerd friends, you're like, hey, I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons. When you're with your jock friends, you don't talk about that, right? Because in the 80s, it was different. People were like, you know, isn't that satanic game? You know, like it wasn't the same, right? And so we felt that we had to be ashamed, right? So it's 2021. You're getting chosen by the major company, right? And you're like, you know what? Thanks for the honor, but no thanks. I'm not going to attach my real name to this. And I'm like, do we not move past this? Right? And it was upsetting. It was a little disturbing, you know, like now, oh, by the way, yeah. So that, you know, it just brought up bad memories. And I'm like, can we just play, you know, and hold our heads high and use our real name? Like, that was a little disturbing. I did not like that. Okay, what did I like? The Dungeon Master. I really like this Dungeon Master a lot. He's a very interesting guy. And B. Dave Walters. So his voice. Actually, I'm sorry. Not his voice. Actually, his thespian quality. He brought like, you know, SNL was like acting, like, and it was really there. Like, you know, he did a really good job when he did the NPCs. There was a lot of vibrancy. There was like, you know, he was getting into it. He was definitely enjoying it. It felt like I was at the theater. So this Dungeon Master reminded me of what like a theater would be like, right? So I thought that was awesome. What did I not like? Okay, here we go. This is on the Dungeon Master, right? By the way, B. Dave Walters. Great game master, not a great dungeon master. This game had no business being run with Dungeons and Dragons. This was a powered by the Apocalypse game. Dungeon World, Urban Shadows, The Sprawl, Apocalypse World. Those are powered by the Apocalypse games. If you're running a game where everybody's talking to each other constantly and you never touch combat even once in a 2-hour session, why are you using Dungeons & Dragons? Dungeons & Dragons has 750 pages of rules. Easily, 3/4 of them are about combat, right? Like, it's ridiculous. So if you got chosen by Wizards of the Coast to run a Dungeons & Dragons game, maybe run Dungeons & Dragons. Maybe not powered by the Apocalypse with a D&D sticker on top, right? That was distressing. I did not like that, right? There was so much conversation in this game and so little combat, and really any real sense that you were in a Dungeons & Dragons world. This really should have been a powered by the Apocalypse game. And to me, B. Dave Walters, if you're picked as a Dungeon Master, you should be a Dungeon Master, not a Game Master, right? So, didn't like that. What did I like? Divergence. Let's talk about divergence and differences in play, okay? So the one thing I did like is this was like, there's a 10-minute discussion on pillow forts in this game. You're never going to see a 10-minute discussion on pillow forts in my Dungeons & Dragons game. But I like that it was here, right? People do play Dungeons & Dragons differently, right? So now, not too different. You can't have a game with no combat. That's ridiculous. What is the point of that, right? But I did like that there were differences in this group's play. And it showed people can play Dungeons & Dragons differently, right? It should be within a range, but you can play and this was very different. So anybody who wanted to play Dungeons & Dragons a little bit differently, like go like 35 degrees off of what Dungeons & Dragons is aiming at, yeah. But if you're going 95 degrees off of what Dungeons & Dragons is aiming at, even to the point of like it's arguable this isn't even Dungeons and Dragons at all. By the way, I don't think a rule book was cracked the entire game. Nothing in it required any checking of the rules in any way. I don't even think anybody even looked at their character sheet, right? Like, it was that far off of Dungeons and Dragons, right? But I do like that I will acknowledge there are different ways to play the game, and this was a good example of that. And just telling people, hey, if you want to do something a little bit different, if you want to, go a little bit angled off, but if you want to go 180 degrees, maybe this ain't the game for you, but you can go 35 degrees off. And I think this group showed you can put some divergence, some difference into your game. I like that. Oh my gosh, what did I not like? There was so much. The majority of this game was my player character likes this player character. Who cares, right? Why are we wasting 1 single second on that, right? This ain't a romance novel. And if your character likes that player character, again, who cares? And here's why. Dungeons & Dragons does not give any tools for dealing with this, right? And frankly, this is an absolute minefield, right? So one, I don't know if you guys were around in the 90s, but I was around when there was a whole lot of the Vampire the Masquerade, my character likes your character, my player character likes your player character, but then 3 months later, those two people were actually together, the players were together, right? Like, there's a ton of this stuff, right? And it was distressing, and and the game did not help people manage it. And Dungeons & Dragons is far worse than Vampire the Masquerade ever was, right? So if your character likes this character and this character likes that character, what's that got to do with the price of tea when it comes to the game? Because you ain't going to be able to do anything about it, right? Like, you're not going to spend a scene explaining how they're together, right? Like, and they didn't, thank God, right? I'm like, this is a road to nowhere, right? And the game has, Dungeons & Dragons is the worst possible game to be encouraging player characters to be flirting with other player characters, right? Because there's absolutely no rules on how this should be managed, and frankly, there's a huge lack of guidance on this, right? And so it's really bad, and a ton of this game was centered on it, and it made the game so much worse, right? So, okay, next, what did I like? B. Dave Walters, the game master in this game, right? He is him, right? He is a man, identifying as a man, but he did a ton of women's voices, right? This is an area where I really struggle, right? I don't really feel comfortable doing other genders' voices, right? So I don't even attempt it, right? But B. David Walters was very good at this. He was able to talk like a woman. It didn't seem like a caricature. It didn't seem insulting. But he seemed comfortable. It seemed like everybody in the game was okay with what he was doing, and it was a good example of how to get this done if you're a dude and you need to talk like a lady. I did like how he handled it. It was good. Oh my gosh, balancing player time. Good Lord, like, not 75% of this game was one player character talking to another player character about which other player character they liked, right? And so you got 5 players, and most of this game was centered with one player character talking to another player character about other player characters, right? In my games, I'm like, here's an NPC. You're all there. You can all talk to him, right? Or her, right? This was terrible. And the other thing is, it's really bad from the perspective of, so bad, right? Of this is the example that they're giving to the world, right? And the thing is, all these players are super mature and, like, nuanced, good players who are like, I'm going to give this person attention and time for them to shine. Most of us don't have local actors to do our games, right? Who are going to wait for their lines, right? Most people are going to get super bored if 2 players are talking to each other for 20 minutes. And it was most of this game, right? If you're a dungeon master, have scenes that include all your player characters. If you want to go 10 or 20% of your game where there's 2 people talking, but don't have 75% of your game with 2 people talking to each other about 2 other people who are not in the room. Terrible time management, okay? What did I like? Oh, youth. there was a lot of youth and vibrancy of the players and the Dungeon Master in this game, right? I'm a 50-year-old dude. I play Dungeons & Dragons. I played Dungeons & Dragons when I was 12, right? It's great for 50-year-old dudes to play Dungeons & Dragons, but it's not great if we're the only people playing Dungeons & Dragons. And a lot of grognards want that. I don't want that, right? I want there to be young, vibrant people playing the game, and everybody in this game was young and vibrant, and I think that's good. I want this hobby to live, and if your players and your Dungeon Masters are close to dying, that's not good for the hobby, right? So this was excellent. What did I not like? Oh my gosh! The player characters fought the player characters more than they fought any NPCs, right? If you're a Dungeon Master, right, make your enemies the NPCs of the player characters. Don't have the player characters threatening to eat each other, not trust each other, betraying each other. Again, like, Vampire the Masquerade is done. Like, we're not playing that anymore, right? Like, this is D&D. Like, we left that back in the 90s, right? A Dungeon Master should equip their world with actual enemies for the player characters, so that the player characters aren't constantly fighting, which was happening in this game. So they were either super attracted to each other or super repulsed by each other. It's not great. This is not, so here's my thing. Having seen the current example of Dungeons & Dragons, for their online example is horrible. Absolutely horrible. I was really frustrated. It wasn't all bad, but it certainly wasn't all good. And it frustrates me that this is what's being served up to people to think this is what Dungeons & Dragons is. All right, that's what I think of what's happening in D&D online example right now. I don't think it's a good example, and I really think it should get fixed. We should keep the diversity. We should keep good, engaged people, right? But, a D&D game should have some combat, right? And a D&D game should not be unrecognizable from a Powered by the Apocalypse game. This stuff's got to get fixed. That's my opinion. What do you think? What do you think of the current Dungeons & Dragons online games that are going up on the D&D YouTube channel? Love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.